How is the sound in the back? Can you hear fine? Okay, good deal. Good morning, everyone. My name is Harrison Marks. I'm the Executive Director of the Coastal Land Trust. And it really is very encouraging to see so many people here on a Saturday morning with blue sky. And so we appreciate you taking your time here. Our presentation this morning is really pretty brief and pretty basic, and then we'll take some questions. So let me start by introducing people with us. I guess I'll start with Mayor Smith, who I don't think needs an introduction here. Mayor Smith will be available and make a few remarks at the end of our presentation. Janice Allen. Janice is our land protection senior advisor now. She has been our director of land protection for a number of years. Eric Breland. He is our technical wizard this morning. We are live streaming, we hope, and recording the session. And let's see, Lizzie is in the back. Lizzie checked you in. Lizzie is our newest employee, so we are very delighted to have her on board. I'm going to speak for just a minute on the background of the Coastal Land Trust. I hope by now most of you know who we are and what we do and how long we've been around. Then we'll talk about the campaign, Mayor's remarks, and then some questions and answers from all of you. Well, questions from you, we hope many answers from us. So first of all, the North Carolina Coastal Land Trust, our mission, as you can hopefully read on the screen, is to enrich our state through the conservation of natural areas, working landscapes, education, and the promotion of good stewardship in our coastal communities. That's a little change from what it used to be, because we recognize what we do at the coast benefits the whole state, and beyond that to the visitors who come here. So in short, we save the places you love at the coast. That's our mission. So we were founded in 1992. We are 501c3. We've had several of those questions. Yes, if you give us money, it is tax deductible to the degree that you can make those sort of deductions. We're non-adversarial, non-advocacy, so we don't oppose development. We believe in landowner rights, and that's enabled us to work with people of all stripes. We work with developers often and manage to convince them to put some money in a green space as they're doing things. We have 11 staff members. As you will see, we cover the whole coast. So if you take 11 staff members and divide it by 31 counties, it's a big area. We cover roughly a third of the state. We do have a volunteer board that they are the overseers of our organization to make sure that we stay on mission and do things the right way. We're a nationally accredited land trust. There are about 28 land trusts in North Carolina. Actually, over half in North Carolina are accredited. And that's a pretty rigorous process. We've just completed our second renewal. So we've been accredited for 15 years, Janice, I think. And it is indeed, they look at all aspects of what we do, from reserves we set aside, because when we protect property, it's in perpetuity. So that's a really long time. And it does mean there has to be money there so that if something were to happen to us, funds are available to pay to have that monitoring and protection done ongoing. You can see we've divided the coastal plain into 3 areas. And if you look at the little dots behind me, those represent projects that we've done up and down the coast. So we conserved special places. And I think everyone here certainly believes that the south end of Topsail Beach is indeed a special place. So what have we accomplished? And the best person to talk about that is Janice Allen, who's been with the organization for 27 years. She is recognized throughout the state as one of the deans of land protection in the land trust community.
Thank you, Harrison. Well, since 1992, when we got started, the Coastal Land Trust has conserved over 90,000 acres of invaluable wetlands, including freshwater marsh and bottomland hardwoods, and important uplands like longleaf pine forests and pristine beaches here at our coast. So when people ask me, what have we been doing the last 30 years? I say many wonderful things. So Harrison mentioned that we cover a huge geographic area, 1/3 of the state. Consequently, we have to be very selective and strategic with our land conservation work, and we focus on special places. Generally, the ABCs of our land conservation strategy is this. We assist others, like local and state governments with their land conservation projects that may result in new nature preserves, parks, and game lands that provide for outdoor public recreation, but also conserve natural areas. We like to buffer and connect existing conservation areas. Sometimes we are daring and we'll buy a big tract of land. Most often, we might find a smaller piece of land that's also very special. We are always striving for excellence, and we have developed what we call our top 40 list. And this is a list of sites that we consider to be very special. They have high conservation value, but they are also threatened with potential development or conversion. So let me give you some examples of our work. I mentioned we assist local governments. Well, to date, we've helped local governments conserve over 1,500 acres of land that is now open to the public as nature parks. And this includes the Brunswick Nature Park of over 900 acres on Town Creek in Brunswick County. We helped New Hanover County buy Airlie Gardens. We've done a lot of work with Craven County, and we bought 130 acres of land along Upper Broad Creek in Craven County. We turned it over to them, and they have created this Latham Whitehurst Nature Park. And recently, we transferred another 172 acres to Craven County. They plan to open that up as a new park in the spring of 2025. We've worked a lot with the Wildlife Resources Commission, and to date, we've conserved almost 17,000 acres together that has been added to our state game lands program. And state game lands are properties that are open to the public for hunting, fishing, and wildlife observation. And on March 31st, we bought the 2,900 acre Spencer Bay tract in Hyde County. Now, this tract we transferred to the state. It is now being managed by the Wildlife Commission. It's part of their Gull Rock game land. And I want to just point out something interesting about this property. When we got the survey for the property, we had to do a double take because the surveyor reported 267,000 linear feet of frontage on Able, Rose, and Spencer Bays. And if any of you can do some quick math, it comes to over 50 miles of shoreline that we conserved with that project. And we also work with state parks, and we have helped them add 1,600 acres to the state park system, including the creation of the 1,300 acre Salmon Creek State Natural Area in Bertie County. And many people know this property as Site X. And if you're at all interested in history, I strongly recommend that you Google Site X and Coastal Land Trust, because it's an interesting story. So if anybody would have told me many years ago that our land conservation work would be helping to secure our national defense, I would have told you you were crazy back then, but not now. We have been working with the Marine Corps Air Station Cherry Point since about 2005. And together, we have conserved over 16,000 acres of property that has both conservation and military value. And this is land that's up against the main base in Havelock and around some of their outlying training fields. We've worked to a lesser extent with the Marine Corps base, Camp Lejeune. I mentioned that we like to buffer existing conservation lands. And I think a good example of this is our work around the Croatan National Forest. Now, the Croatan is 160,000 acres. It spans portions of Jones, Carteret, and Craven counties. And we like to say that it's the ecological centerpiece of our coast. And while it's big, there's a lot of inholdings. And with new projects like the US 70 bypass that's cutting right through the forest, it is becoming more and more fragmented. In fact, Ron Hudson, the district ranger, once said to me, he said, you know, it's like death by 1,000 cuts. So in 2018, the Coastal Land Trust launched the Croatan Protection Initiative. And this was to help protect some of these inholdings and further buffer the forest. And to date, we've conserved over 3,300 acres of land in and around the forest, including our 923-acre Burn Preserve in Craven County and our 247-acre Island Creek Preserve in Jones County. And this latter preserve literally serves as the viewshed for the Croatan's Island Creek Forest Walk Trail. I mentioned that we like to connect existing conservation lands. We like to especially do that along what we consider to be our priority waterways, like the Lower Cape Fear River, where we've conserved over 18,000 acres of land, including this 1,000-acre Dollison Swamp Tract to date, which is located just north of Wilmington. So we are very interested in doing high-quality land conservation. And I think a good example of this is our Springers Point Preserve out on Ocracoke Island. Maybe some of you have been out there, but Springers Point has a beautiful maritime forest. It's got some nice coastal marsh. Some people have said that Blackbeard the pirate may have met his demise offshore, but we have been working for a while to consolidate a beautiful preserve. We started in 2002. We bought the core acreage of about 31 acres. And then in 2006, we added another 91 acres that helps us connect this preserve to the Cape Hatteras National Seashore. And then in 2020 and 2021, we added the last remaining inholdings. So now the preserve is 132 acres and it's open to the public year round, and it's visited by over 2,000 residents and tourists annually. Finally, the Coastal Land Trust works with private landowners to conserve working farm and forest land that provides us with food and fiber. And again, we kind of focus on multiple conservation values with these farm and forest land tracts. We're very selective about that. So we're looking for properties that have either scenic, historic, recreational, ecological values aside from farm and forest land. So you might ask, how does the Coastal Land Trust conserve land? Well, we protect land by acquiring it in fee simple or acquiring a conservation easement. And a conservation easement is just a voluntary, legally binding agreement between a landowner and a land trust in which the landowner still owns the land and can use that land subject to the restrictions in that easement, like perhaps a restriction of no development. We work only with willing landowners, and most of them have some conservation interest. Now, landowners are our primary partners in all of our transactions. We want this to be a win-win situation for both. Now, land or easements can be bought by the Coastal Land Trust, or they can be donated to us by a landowner. If we buy land or an easement, we can pay no more than fair market value as determined by a state certified appraiser. Now, land trusts generally do not have a pot of money sitting in the bank that we can go forward and buy land. We are actually having to raise those funds for each project through a variety of public and private grant sources. So we are not a typical buyer in the real estate market. We cannot pay whatever we want, and we generally can't move as quickly as the typical buyer. All right, so now let's turn to what you've come here to hear. What the heck is the Coastal Land Trust doing about the South End? Well, as Harrison pointed out, the Coastal Land Trust strives to conserve special places that people love here at the coast. And that is certainly the story here with the South End of Topsail Beach. The South End, also known as the Point or Topsail Beach, is one of the last large, privately owned and undeveloped pieces of land left anywhere on our North Carolina barrier islands. I think we can all agree that the South End is a special place. It has 149 acres of pristine beach, dunes, wetlands, and maritime shrub. It provides habitat for many federally listed species like the red knot and sea beach amaranth. The Wildlife Resources Commission has identified over 30 species of special concern that have been out there, and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has included the South End in designated critical habitat for wintering piping plovers and nesting loggerhead sea turtles. There is a lot of sound to sea frontage along the Atlantic Ocean, Banks Channel, and New Topsail Inlet, and the state has designated Banks Channel as high quality waters and open shellfish waters. And finally, the Natural Heritage Program has included the South End in the Lee-Hutaf Natural Heritage Area, deemed of exceptional ecological significance, their highest ranking. The Coastal Land Trust thinks the South End is currently unprotected from future residential development. Now, we may not all agree that the South End is developable. However, here's what we do know. Since about 2005 to the present, 5 different real estate appraisers have appraised the South End. They all have agreed that this property is a highly developable and attractive property. They have come to the same conclusion that the highest and best use of that property is for limited residential development. They have recognized that it's zoned conservation, but that conditional rezoning is possible. Now, obviously, any development of this tract would be subject to wetlands and CAMA regulations, which would restrict lot size and location, but not development per se. And according to our recent appraisals that were done in 2024, there's about 65 to 70 acres of developable uplands. That's above the first line of stable vegetation. And as part of that, there's about 11 acres right behind the Serenity Point development that is actually outside of the Coastal Barrier Resources Act zone, which means a buyer could get national flood insurance. And that's a good thing for development. I hope most of you have heard that the Coastal Land Trust has the South End under contract. How did we get there? Well, in early January, the Coastal Land Trust submitted a letter of intent to the sellers. Soon thereafter, we met with them and we negotiated the purchase price, which had to be supported by at least one current appraisal. Soon thereafter, we contracted out not one, but 2 appraisals. And then we signed that contract on March 15th. Soon thereafter, we received both appraisals, and both appraisals exceeded the purchase price we agreed on. And then on March 26th, we officially announced this project to the public through a press release. Now, I'd like to point out that this is not our typical business model. Due to the sensitivity of landowner negotiations, information on projects is generally not released to the public until after we close. So why are we doing it now? Well, we know that there's a considerable amount of interest in this project, and we also need public help. So Harrison mentioned, I've been with the Coastal Land Trust for a good long time now, about 27 years. And one thing I've learned about land conservation is that timing is important. And I'm going to have to say that I think the South End may well be our Goldilocks story. Back in 2006, the Coastal Land Trust tried to buy about 40 to 50 acres of this property right near the inlet. That's all we thought we could buy at the time because of the very high appraised value. I'm not even going to say what that was, but it was very high. We basically negotiated at the top of the real estate bubble. And as many of you may remember, the real estate market tanked in 2007 due to the subprime mortgage crisis, and our deal fell through. Basically, too much for too little, timing not right. And then in 2022, the Olsons came to us and they proposed donating a conservation easement on about 120, 130 acres of the property outside of where they were going to develop. And at the time, that seemed attractive to us because we could protect a relatively large portion of the property at a very low cost to us. Now, we understand lots of citizen opposition to this. It was a complicated deal. The Olsons ended up withdrawing their conditional rezoning request. Again, timing not right. And here we are in 2024. The Coastal Land Trust has the entire 149 acres under contract to purchase it. We think the price is reasonable. It's supported by 2 appraisals. The other important thing is that we had a state partner step up, the Division of Coastal Management, that is willing to be the ultimate fee title owner of this property. That was very important to us. Seems to be some good local support here. I'm thinking the timing is right. I do want to point out, the owners were planning to relist this property in early 2024, but they are now giving us a window of opportunity to purchase this property for conservation. We do have a daunting but doable challenge to raise nearly $8 million to complete the project. This $8 million includes the purchase price, the transaction and closing expenses. It includes some staff time and interest on a bridge loan, which I'll explain in a minute. Again, not our typical business model to be out in the public sharing information about our funding strategy. And the reason for that is because of the considerable amount of uncertainty with funding. But here we go. We're going to share what we have, okay? So the Coastal Land Trust has already submitted 4 grant requests to public funders specifically for this project. We've submitted one to the Fish and Wildlife Service's North American Wetlands Conservation Act program, to the North Carolina Land and Water Fund, to the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation's Acres for America program, and to the Fish and Wildlife Service's National Coastal Wetlands Conservation Act grant program. Now, if we're able to get every single grant approved for what we asked, that would be about $5.5 million. But we may not get all these grants. We may not get what we asked for. So I've put a lower range of $4 million. And as you can see, just with these grants alone, we're not at nearly $8 million. However, there is tremendous local support for this project. The town of Topsail Beach passed a resolution of support for this project on April 10th, and they have indicated a willingness to commit $800,000 to buy the 1.5 acres that includes the parking lot. This will help us with our acquisition. And the Coastal Land Trust launched a private capital campaign, which to date has raised almost $550,000 from 215 private donors. Our capital campaign goal for this project is between $1 and $2 million. And I want to point out that Conserve the Point is actively supporting our campaign to save the South End, and they recently sent us a 5-figure check. Thank you. Woo! So let's look at the funding now. If, again, we get all of our grants and we get our capital campaign goal of $2 million, we'd be at about $7.8 million. Again, if we go back to only $4 million with the grants, and we're where we stand today with the private capital campaign, we're at $5.3 million. Are we there yet? Well, you can see what we're dealing with, okay? Again, there is no guarantees on any of the grant applications submitted. I think they're winners, but we'll see. The state grant program alone is highly competitive. Land and Water Fund received 68 grant requests for $85 million. They'll likely get between 40 and 45 million. And for the federal funding, we picked a presidential election year. And that may delay or jeopardize some of those federal pots of money. We'll see. We also have not nailed down who's going to be our lender. And so we don't know yet what our interest rate is going to be on this loan. Now, in the past, we've used a private philanthropist who has been willing to give us a loan at 3%, but he may be tapped out. We'll know in the fall. If he is tapped out, we may have to go to a bank. And that means we'll be paying interest at probably prime, which I think is around 8.5% right now. Now, we have made a request to the General Assembly for a direct appropriation for this project in next year's budget. We have not done this before. This is something new for us, but we did talk with Senator Brent Jackson, who's the head of the Appropriations Committee. He came down and visited the South End. He appears to be supportive. We'll see what the state budget has, hopefully in July. Let me talk a minute about the deal structure, okay? We are not going to know about all our grants until about December of this year. But even if we're spot on with all the grants, we probably will not have the grant funds in hand by our contract closing date of March 31st of 2025. That's when we have to close. That is why we are taking out a bridge loan to buy this property in what we're calling a first closing. Now, if the town provides us with money for the 1.5 acres, we're going to transfer that to the town. That's the little area in yellow in that first closing so that we can continue to provide public access. Then the Coastal Land Trust would retain the remainder of the property, 147.5 acres, but it's going to be subject to a deed of trust with that lender. We're not there yet. Hopefully, once we receive all the grant funds in hand, we will then remove that deed of trust and transfer that larger parcel to the state in a second closing. And that would be managed by the Division of Coastal Management as a state natural area. Now, the town of Topsail Beach, they have indicated this interest in the 1.5 acres, which is shown in this map. That includes the existing half-acre parking area. And of course, they're interested in continuing to manage that parking area. They've expressed the need for possibly some underground utilities, maybe some additional public amenities, like an approved restroom. Bottom line is that 1.5 acres will be subject to deed restrictions that only allow activities that are either complementary to or do not impair the conservation recreation values of the larger parcel. And we will all be getting together to discuss those restrictions. The Coastal Land Trust would like to see some nice signage down there on the regulations and the conservation values. So many people have asked us, well, if you do this deal, will the South End be permanently protected? And we'd like to say emphatically yes. This is what we are trying to do. We want to protect this property forever from residential development. And there will be layers of restrictions on this property. We already mentioned there'll be deed restrictions on the 1.5 acres. And once the coastal management gets this property, if there's any state funding, and there will be, they will be required to dedicate the property under the State Nature Preserves Act. And what that means is the North Carolina Natural Heritage Program will develop articles of dedication that will prevent development and will protect the conservation values while allowing the traditional public use. If there's any federal money, that will be additional layers of protection. They will require us to record either a notice of federal participation, a notice of grant restrictions, and or deed restrictions. It will be protected. So what about future ownership by Division of Coastal Management? What are they going to do out there? We do not have all the answers for you today. There will be at least another meeting that the Coastal Management will put on regarding management. But here's what we can say. They are very interested in working with the Wildlife Resources Commission to help them post and monitor shorebird nesting out there. As many of you know, Volunteers here on the island, along with the Wildlife Resources Commission, already carry out sea turtle nest marking and monitoring all along Topsail Island, including the south end. We would like to see more enforcement of existing beach rules and regulations. And I think the state's willing to work with the town on how to do that. There may be some future possible amenities for the public, subject to funding and public input. The only things that I've heard to date is possibly a handicap accessible path to the waterway and possibly a boardwalk trail. Again, subject to funding and public input. The Coastal Land Trust would like to stay involved. We'd like to do some maybe field trips, in-class programs for kids on shorebirds and sea turtles. Bottom line, there'll be more public meetings. For me, the Coastal Land Trust land conservation work matters. It matters. And I know you are here today because what happens out at the south end matters to you. And the Coastal Land Trust thinks that the south end has unparalleled coastal conservation values. And it currently is unprotected from future residential development. So we are here today to unabashedly ask for your assistance to help us save the south end. Help us protect this special place in your backyard. Help us meet our private campaign goal of between 1 and 2 million. And if you're interested, please visit the Coastal Land Trust website at www.coastallandtrust.org for further information. Now, the Coastal Land Trust would like to thank the owners for this opportunity. We'd like to thank the town of Topsail Beach for their support. We'd like to thank William Snyder and Nancy Thomason for their invaluable assistance. And we'd like to thank the many community members. We'd like to thank the many community members for their contributions today. The local support we've seen here is powerful. And together, let's make this happen. Thank you.
It's been a long process, hasn't it? First, I want to say to all the ladies, happy Mother's Day. It's well deserved and you do a lot of things for all of us and I'm very appreciative. Many of you remember when this whole process started about 2 years ago, I said you have to trust the process. Let the process work. Give everyone a chance to have their say, but let's be respectful. And I want to thank you for allowing that to happen. The process did work and so forth. One thing that many of you may not know is several years ago, we were already in discussions with our state legislature about how to buy this piece of property. So it was not a new fact when the Coastal Land Trust went up there to talk to them. Our name was known, they knew what we were talking about, and we do have the support of Senator Jackson, Carson Smith, Senator LaRaza, and several others, Senator Lee, and so forth. So that part of the process is working, and I've got some faith that there will probably be some money coming our way from a grant. I can't tell you how much, it's still up to them. They're still arguing over medical marijuana and a few other things. So, but the process worked. As was pointed out in this particular area, yes, the town would like to buy that parking lot and buy an acre of land. We have no intentions of putting up a park or anything above ground. It's all in terms of that extra acre, but we do have to think ahead here. If and when we have a sewer system, we're going to need some stuff to go in the ground. It has to go there. If we decide we need to upgrade that restroom, That means where do you put the septic field for that particular restroom instead of having the porta potty? And then there's a few other things that we're looking ahead with certain other infrastructure, water and so forth that goes around in that area. And even, you know, the internet, the fiber optics, they got to have a place to go. So you may see a lid on the ground, but that's about the extent of what we're looking at for that extra acre. But we don't have a handicap access down there. How do we put one in? And those that drive down there and through that cul-de-sac, you'll understand there's a water problem and an erosion problem. We need to have the land to fix that problem there. Because if there's one area on our island where we have a contamination problem, it is right at that point. There's a hole right there. And I won't say we've been fortunate the last 2 years, it has been clean. But if I go back several years, we've had swimming restrictions in that area because the bacteria rate was too high. So we know we need to clean that area up and do a little bit of work. And so that's what the intent is. And we have to lay it out. And we're going to have to get some people involved in this. If I go way, way back, many of you will know that Serenity Point used to be in this conservation zone, and past commissioners decided to allow Serenity Point to be built with certain restrictions. All of those restrictions stay in place. None of those change with this move and so forth. But the next thing that the town is having a concern about is what is going to be our responsibility for this 148 acres, assuming we get that acre and a half in the future. How much resources will we have to put forth to help manage that area from a police standpoint and so forth? Because nothing in terms of the public access should change. They still have access to the beach. The one area that we have big concerns about is we don't want to happen to this piece of property what is now happening to Lee Hutaf. If those of you that go down there on many given weekends, especially during the summer, you know that area is being trampled and the habitat's being destroyed. We don't want it to become an open access area. We don't want to add any other accesses through that area. We want to keep it as natural as we can and give the scientists a chance to work with it and so forth. There are already standing restrictions on dogs and other things that can happen down there at different times of the year. And those will stay in place. We've been working with the federal Fish and Wildlife and the state. All those stay in place. And this piece of property grows now at about 2 feet a year, given what's going on. So, but we still have to keep the inlet open, so there will be dredging done. And that sand will be, when we pull it, we'll probably put it right back on our beach. It seems to be a perfect recycling system, at least the last 2 times we've done it. What we needed on the beach, we took out of the inlet. It's worked twice very beautifully for us. So hopefully in about another 4 or 5 years, we won't have any shoaling and then we'll have to redredge it again. So that's the plan the town has laid out. There's still some uncertainties. I can't answer every question, but we do have a meeting next week with the Division of Coastal Management. They're bringing their team here. We're going to sit down and talk about it. And we've asked for a grant through them for that access. That's where part of the 800,000 would come from. And they're going to have some requests for that. They would like to see some handicap access down there, which is not there. And they would like to see it cleaned up a little bit. How we treat the parking lot, we have no intentions of expanding what's there. You know, but it does cost money to maintain it and so forth. And we spend probably around $50,000 to $60,000 in maintenance and people costs on managing that parking lot. Now, the income generates a little over $80,000. So the town is making a little money off of that, but we would look at down the road how we would use that money to keep that area, the maintenance and everything, if we have to do any upgrades and so forth. So that would come out of the budget processing. So that's where we're really at. I'm here to answer any other questions you may have. But I will tell you that all the commissioners from the conversations I've had are committed to this. I think in their own way, they're gonna commit their own resources. My wife and I have committed some resources to the land trust. And I have asked the other municipalities of Pender County to show support. I know Watha had a commission meeting Thursday night. They were supposed to pass their resolution. Surf Cities promised me they're gonna do that to show their support to the state, to help the state understand this is not just a one-town job, it's a area-wide commitment. So that's all I have for you. I'm here to answer any questions. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd also like to comment in terms of Conserve the Point, Topsail, and to say in addition to a five-figure donation from Conserve the Point, the leadership of Conserve the Point has also contributed, dug in their pocket, and pretty substantial contributions there as well. So with that, I think we're ready to open it up for questions and answers. Yes, ma'am. If you'd come up, there's a microphone that'll get passed around. If you'd identify yourself by name.
If you're gonna continue to allow vehicles to go during the winter time onto.
That, it's up to the commissioners every year at this point in time. You have to understand that goes back to our whole heritage, and I'm not saying it's the way it's gonna happen, but when we're doing a dredging job or a beach job, we would just have to restrict the driver. But we do require, if that driver, they have to have a four-wheel drive, they have to have a fishing permit before they're allowed out there. It is monitored by the police, and so forth. And I can't tell you what the action is gonna be right now for this year. That'll be up to the commissioners. But in terms of it, but we'll take a look at what space, what Mother Nature has given us. And if it's too crowded, because Mother Nature puts that there and takes it away all the time, then they'll make their decision about the October time frame.
Okay, it does, as everybody knows, grinds up, you know, just kind of tears it all up.
Yeah.
And of course, I have been caught
We've had
myself.
our coach.
I'm guilty myself with no fishing pole. But
We've had our coach. Part of the business, and he is not concerned about the truck or vehicle traffic on that having a long-term detrimental impact on that beach. Our biggest concern is how to keep people from wandering into that property. And so one of the discussions we'll have with the Division of Coastal Management is their responsibility to keep signage up that says it's a no trespassing area. And that will be one of the questions we have with them. What do they expect from the town if we find people that it will be deemed private property that's owned by the Division of Coastal Management. So unless they tell us to address that, we have no authority in the town to do a whole lot. So those are the kind of discussions that have to happen after ownership takes place.
Yes, sir. Yeah. If you'd also state your name with your question.
Ray Zeller, live in Old Point. It's quite happy for boats that go out. Really excited about the country, first of all. Good job to your team. So obviously, you know, with boaters, so there's a lot of people who boat just coming to the island by boat, the beach. And now with Lee Island becomes so saturated, especially, you know, the dredging, it's really getting really fat with the traffic. So if the Coastal Land Trust takes ownership of this, how will that impact plain old boaters that go and hang out on that beach?
It
Will
will,
the access stay the same? Will it, you know, I understand the thing about the birds and stuff, but will there change?
basically, there'll be no change from what it is today. That is a public trust beach area up to the high water mark. So that will stay the same. There's no change regardless of who has ownership of that property. And that's throughout the entire state of North Carolina. That beach area, whether it's here or Nag's Head or wherever, part of the public access area, it stays the same. So the boats will be able to pull up on shore just like they do now. I do expect to see a little more activity from our marine fisheries down there, looking at boats and things like that. So hopefully people will behave themselves.
So thank you for that, that's important. And the other part, so if it does get developed, let's just say, would that restrict the beach?
In terms of development, it's not gonna get developed.
Well, I hope not. But if it did, I mean, if people,
No, it still doesn't change, where any development, doesn't matter where it is, it's still part of the public access, public has access to the beach, whether they're coming by boat, or they're coming through a crossover or whatever. It doesn't change.
thank you very much for that, appreciate it.
Next question?
And I will just one add, unless somebody owns the entire area and restrictions on how to get there, we have one island, but still the beach is part of the public trust. You know, we can only get there by boat. I won't say which island it is, but
That's right.
Hi, my name is Kenny Morgan. I had a question, would the present owners be able to participate in the funding of this via conservation easement to lower their taxes on this as capital gain tax, and therefore lower the net cost, or maybe down to a lower cost?
Well, sure.
Okay.
Janice, you're repeat the question.
Yeah, actually, yeah,
Could the present landowners participate in the funding of this via
Right.
conservation easement to lower the net cost for this, and by virtue of that, lower their capital gains taxes on this by?
so they are contributing, and that's not part of the budget.
Okay, so that's in addition.
So they are basically selling this property in fee simple at a bargain sale because of our two appraisals that have appraised it for more than we're paying. So they can write that off. And actually, we're very pleased at how well they came to us on the price. So,
just to add one more little comment in terms of the town of Topsail Beach municipality goes from basically the ocean side all the way over to the center of the intercoastal waterway. Surf City doesn't go all the way over to the intercoastal waterway, they stop in their marsh area, so we have jurisdiction in that whole area. And all the town ordinances apply to that, all the town restrictions and so forth apply to that area particular thing. Now, getting into some of these areas by the town is very difficult. You know, we don't keep a full-time boat on our staff. I mean, if we had a full-time boat, it would take 2 more officers. Because you gotta put 2 officers on it and so forth, and we think we're better serving the public with the setup we have today. But if we find that there's other issues, that's why we call in Marine Fisheries and a few others to give us support. Or in terms of that, we have purchased a jet water ski for a rescue that our fire department has been trained in, so we do have that facility to use for any rescues and so forth. But you know, we ask people to respect our ordinances and so forth, and we'll do the best to work with everybody that comes down here.
Name is Hope Longest. Would you reassure us, Harrison, that the sellers are indeed pleased with this offer?
Yes,
And just reassure us of that, so there wouldn't be any repercussions.
sure, I'd be happy to. The question was looking for reassurance that the sellers are in fact happy with this transaction. And all indications we have are yes. We have good communication Janice has been the primary conduit, I guess, between us and the sellers, but I too have been communicating. So we very much are dependent on sellers and the goodwill of sellers in order to do this. I think the fact that they had other things they could do with this property. They could have sold this property for more. We are quite convinced of that. So they have the same, I mean, I think they love this property the same way that many of you do. And I feel confident that they are very happy to see this go in the conservation direction. Yes, right here.
I'm Beverly Dawes, Sally, I just want to know if it continues to grow to where it is now, does it encompass that growing area?
It will, it'll run to the water or to the high water mark. I do think from talking to Chris Gibson, who many of you know, that the plan is that the inlet will remain pretty stable. So Mayor, do you have a different take on that?
Very stable. What it used to grow 15 feet a year.
Right.
So now we're down to like 2 feet a year roughly, is what we see. And it's gonna weigh, some years may be less, some years may be more. But we think about an average of 2 feet growth a year will probably work out over the next 10 years. So, but as it grows, it stays with the conservation easement and so forth.
When
The town gets bigger.
Yeah. So, when Janice was involved in this in 2006, I understand that the property at that time was 120 acres versus 149 now. So that tells you that's part of what on our board is a gentleman by the name of Dr. Stan Riggs. And generally speaking, Dr. Riggs would be not in favor of doing something on a barrier island because of the issues that everyone who lives here knows. But in this instance, we're talking about highlands, we're talking about a scrub maritime forest already, and presumably that would grow. So this is a special case for a special place.
This area also falls in under the inlet hazard area defined by the state. The Division of Coastal Management's scientific panel is actually reviewing the whole inlet hazard area, not just for New Thompson Inlet, but all the inlets. They came out about 3 years ago with an updated plan. There were a lot of public comments. They've had to go back to the drawing board on it and take a relook at it. I know they have some special interest in looking at ours for various reasons. So I'm expecting to see them revise what they put out 3 years ago, and where they included Trout Avenue, all of Trout Avenue in the hazard area. I'm expecting that will probably come out in this next revision because of the stability that we've shown to the north side of the inlet over the last few years. But it's up to the science panel. They have their own algorithms and everything they use to define what's going on, and they have aerial photographs that go back over the last 50 years of that property. So they'll be looking at all that information before they give us their final determination.
Other questions?
Hello, my name is Albert Meyer. My wife Kim and I are full-time residents of the South End. I'm a member of the board of directors of the Condominium Owners Association of Starting Point. And I've been asked by President Mike Boswell to make this announcement at this meeting that on the annual spring meeting, April 26th, Mr. William Snyder was able to come and talk to us. The homeowner association, the 54 owners, unanimously endorsed the contract between the North Carolina Land Trust and the owners for the purchase of the South End. Furthermore, have committed time, talent, and financial resources to make this a reality. We're aware that this has been tried before and has failed, and we want to do everything in our power to make this a successful purchase.
That's it. This has been very interesting for us because first of all, we don't normally go out in front as Janice explained, but it's been interesting as I've had the opportunity to meet with several of you here who have been most generous, but to be thanked for what we're doing when in fact it's really the support of this community that makes this possible at this time. So maybe a round of applause for yourselves, I think.
Right, we're around 2015 and it kind of, we got started, but about 6 months after that, it kind of waned very badly at that point. So that was the last time we tried to hold all the commitment, to try to raise funds to buy this property.
Any other questions, comments? You know, I would say, yes, I'm sorry, in the back.
Ask you private. How is that, who's leading that effort to spearhead getting these private funds to meet the gap?
Well, I think one of the challenges that Janice described is, you know, our grant sources and the, any sort of direct allocation from the legislatures up in the air in terms of who's leading it, the contributions would be to us. The thank you to William and Nancy was really because of that. I would add that along with that, Roy Costa, who many of you know, and Nancy and Michelle, many of the people involved in the Conserve the Point are working closely with Nancy and William and others at this point. So the fundraising will continue, I guess, is the answer. If you're interested in helping with that, or if you're interested in making a contribution, you can do that through our website, or if you want to contact any of the people I just named, they can certainly put you in touch with me or Eric, either one. Does that answer your question? It has been interesting because William and Nancy, I think, expected that we did this routinely, and this is very different than our model. So in fact, we've talked to a number of people who have the means to really provide substantial contributions by that, you know, but we welcome contributions, whether it's $100 or $50 or whatever the amount might be. And we'll continue down the path of individually meeting with people who are interested in talking with us, and let people decide how much they can participate in the fundraising. In addition, there's a group that's working on things. I know that Roy and William have divided up businesses who are anxious to have point of sale materials in their locations. We'll be participating in, I'm sure I'm going to get this wrong, Autumn for Topsail Beach, Autumn in Topsail. Thank you. So we will be there with some, we have to be selling something while we're there to participate in that event. But so we will continue with both grassroots and larger donations. In the first, to tell you, one of the most surprising things to us was in the first, I guess, maybe 10 days after our announcement, we ended up with 50,000 plus over $50,000 in donations just on our website, which, you know, that's just not something, I wish we could do that for operating funds. And I would encourage all of you who are giving to this to remember us. We would not have been in a position to do this if we didn't receive operating funds on a regular annual basis as well. So make a big contribution now and you can reduce it a little on an annual basis.
Some of you may have worked for companies that this would be of great interest. I know Harrison's talking to one particular company right now, but they have, say, committees or whatever that look for things like this. So you get the message back to a former company or a current company that you're with, that they like to step in and help, that would be appreciated. But it would go through Harrison and his team at the Coastal Land Trust.
While I look for the next hand over here, I'll extend your answers like Harrison. If anyone has questions about how to contribute different things, when, why, what is our strategy for fundraising, I'm happy to go into the nitty-gritty details with you, just combine afterwards.
We do, I've had questions. We do accept stock, easily do that. And for looking around the room, I suspect some number of you have required distributions from 401ks or IRAs. So, you know, you can, that's a very efficient way to give. You can, and you can split years. You can give us some this year and some next year, and that'll be good. Let's see, is there? I think we have another question coming. And for those who are participating live stream, I'm sorry, I have not been repeating the questions. I will try and do that.
I'm Becky Spiegel, and I just like to say, I don't have a question. It's just been such a joy to sit in this group this morning with you. And I think we should have TV cameras across America showing this like they show the bad news. And we are great for everybody that's a part of this. And for those like me who don't get to stay on here on you, I am so thankful for a neighbor who keeps me informed. And for the last so many months, I have watched her little car back out of the driveway and be gone for hours and come in with stacks and folders and couldn't wait to hear the news of what's going on. So to the people who took the bull by the horns, thank you. And to we, the people of Thompson, South Thompson and beyond, praise be to God. Let's make it happen.
Thomas, I just wanted to add something to what Harrison said. If you got a 401k, you're soon gonna be taking distributions, or it's time to take a distribution. Think about it, what you're giving then is pre-tax dollars. So the 20, 30, 40% you're gonna pay to the government when you get that money in your checking account. But the government is basically subsidizing your donation to keep this piece of property in our backyard. So that's the beauty of being able to do it that way.
So for anybody on the live stream, it was just an endorsement to again use those pre-tax dollars. Anyone else?
I'm Frank McMillan, and I'm probably like most people here, we need to, y'all to send us an email, giving you our emails, and tell us how to make the contribution. I don't this gentleman, but I think it was, hold on this.
Wonderful. We'll do that as a request to send out information in via email so that you can more readily donate. Yeah.
Hi, Ray, I'm sorry, I'm excited about this and working with me also, just rules and how to do this. And I put it in, I'm on the board of the Hartford Track Club, and we have a donation going on, and I put an email out for this. And in 2 weeks, we had 40 people that are coming now, and that was like, within a 2 week time frame. And we had some local, Eastern, outfitters that had a couple, fishing, stores donated some stuff towards the raffle. So it just really take momentum, in a small way, I know, but I'm excited about this and every dollar will really count. So thanks, Eric, for he's gonna also speak at the. Thank you.
Thank you. That was another expression of support coming out of the boating community, Harbor Yacht Club. Yeah. Any others? I can tell you it's been a joy for us. I mean, this is our mission. I mean, this is exactly what we love to do, and to meet with people who are at least as excited as we are about protecting property. That really has been a joy being here. Anything else, Mayor? You have any closing words?
We wish everybody a nice weekend. We've got a beautiful weekend out there.
Yeah, we do have one. I'm sorry. Yes, there is one thing in the back. Yes, there are signs in the back. We would, if you, there we go. Jim Cornegie's holding one up. So you're welcome to take a sign. There's pretty high competition. We thought about selling them, but we're happy to have you take them. But honestly, please do take them and put them in an appropriate place. There are different rules in different cities. So Surf City, I think, limits how long they can be up. And I think in Topsail Beach, there are restrictions about being in the. Okay. Anything else? Thank you to those of you who have written a check already or made a commitment. And we are actually up above that $550,000 number now and about 225 donors. So it is heartwarming. Thank you.